Fuck yeah. Welcome to Talks News at Night, TOX. I'm your host, Whaley Dyard, here to bring you fresh reports from the President's Garden. I heard there was an executive order. Welcome to the Working Class Observer Class Warfare Report. I'm your host, that dude in a tiny box. Or in your ear if this is on the podcast. Pick your poison. But I heard big man in DC done dropped a new executive order. I have not heard anything about it except for maybe like a 15-second quote. But from all these headlines I can read, it sounds like he is bolstering the police. In a time when public are saying, are saying defund the police, he gives the police more power. At least that's what these headlines say. From Trump offers full-throated defense of police and executive action signing. Trump signs order on police, but Democrats and activists say it falls short. Santa Rosa County sheriff encouraged by Trump's executive order on police reform. So that guy's excited. Trump signs order on police reform, doesn't mention racism, says Associated Press. New York Times says Republicans signal narrow policing overhaul as Trump signs limited order. Nashville local says Nashville police politicians react to Trump's executive order on policing. Oh yeah. Yeah, I saw like 15 seconds of this. We're going to get into it. I'm going to keep getting on some of these headlines real quick. Trump signs executive order to reform policing, encourages ban on chokeholds, ABC News. Clyburn dismisses Trump executive order on policing as doing much too little and does not go far enough. I couldn't read the whole quote, but I had to click the Fox News thing to read the full quote. USA Today reports Trump signs order addressing police misconduct, but some experts say it's not blah, blah, blah. So it seems like there's a pretty sweeping consensus. Some people blaming others in their headlines for Trump not going far enough, like blaming others saying he's not going far enough, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I heard like 15 seconds of some bullshit, and I thought this might be the time to do the most boring thing possible ever, which is actually read an executive order. And then that led me down another rabbit hole. But we'll get there. What's this dude's Twitter handle? Man, it pulls up everybody first, but I should just type it like that. Donald J. Trump Twitter. Oh, you know what? It's probably not even on there. It's at the White House. Trump's other Twitter account. White House official Twitter account. Okay. White House Live, White House, the White House. Yep, right there. Oh, I'm getting to that. Let's see here. All right. This is what I had seen. So, correction, it was actually 50 seconds and not 15. This executive order directs federal funding to support officers in constructive community engagement and provides more resources for core responders. Vague language. Yay.
Our police department said whatever you can
Take
do
vague
about that,
language at face
please
value.
let us know. We're letting you know. We're doing a lot about it. In addition, my order will direct
I should probably
federal
restart
funding to support. Under this
This
executive order,
podcast
departments
is a
will
mess.
also
I ain't
need a
just throwing this
share
shit together on the fly.
of information about credible abuses so that officers with significant issues do not simply move from one police department to the next. That's a problem. And the heads of Our police department said, whatever you can do about that, please let us know. We're letting you know. We're doing a lot about it. In addition, my order will direct federal funding to support officers in dealing with homeless individuals and those who have mental illness and substance abuse problems.
I don't know if I ever talked about this publicly or with people, but I remember having a lot of thoughts about this, or I don't know if I had written about it back in the Trump persuasion compilation days. But I do remember talking about how the police were eventually going to be used to sweep up people suffering from quote-unquote mental illness as state defined, and then also the homeless situation. I feel like somewhere I had included this. I'm not sure where. But I mean, it seems like a natural conclusion to private prisons, really, as it's already probably filled up with as many refugees as it can be. But it's not surprising he's using federal funding to sweep homeless people and
such as social workers who can help
quote
officers
unquote mental
manage
illness,
these
because it
complex
makes sense to have people who have complex brains for cops with guns to show up and handle those situations.
encounters.
This I agree with.
Under this executive order, departments will also
It's a
need
joke.
a share
It's a terrible joke. It's a bad joke.
of information about credible abuse.
All right. So that's the little bit that I had heard, and I was like, that's some shit. So it sounds like this homie's giving them money in a time when people are literally in the streets tearing down their cities in the demands of justice and defunding. The exact opposite of democracy. Luckily enough, there's still enough democracy to have people talk on Twitch and have autonomous zones, but for how long? So I clicked on CNN's because here's the thing that I had actually originally fallen into, because I thought, okay, I'll just look it up. I'll go to the government website and I'll just read it straight from the fucking horse's dumb nose. And I clicked on it right here. Yep, Federal Register, yes sir. National Archives, yes sir. Yeah. It's not here. It's not here yet. So, but then I realized, holy fuck, he has signed a lot of executive orders this year. I counted them. There's 26. That's nearly one per fucking week. I don't know if anybody has signed these many papers in the executive office. That shit's buck. And I like, some of it makes sense. Like, we heard about it pretty loud and clear, like the COVID here delegating additional authority under the Defense Production Act. I remember when he touted doing a bunch of that. I remember when he activated armed forces to set up temporary hospitals. I remember that one. But there's just other ones that... Yeah, providing an order of secession within the Department of Interior. Nope. This one just flew right by me. By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including a Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998. Subject to provisions of Section 3 of this order, the officers named in Section 2. Okay. Bunch of language. Why would you have to have an executive order? I guess he's setting into law, like, how you would succeed as Secretary of Interior, but apparently that's super important to Trump. All right. And that's what I'm worried about this language, too, is that executive orders are really dry. Really extremely dry in their language. They're boring. They're terrible. They're shit. But they're also filled with the coding, the language, the repertoire that they are going to use in civil defense. So as gross and toxic as politics may be, I'm going to swallow a very large pill right here. Somehow CNN has the printed executive order before the National Archives. So shout out to the Chinese News Network for always being around. I appreciate y'all. Again, that was another joke. I don't actually think they're paid off by China. Maybe. I don't know. Can I really know anything? By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. What is the amendment that he constantly... Article 21. Article 21 is the reason why he keeps pushing out as many fucking executive orders as he can. I'm pretty sure it's Article 21. I'll have to watch Vice again to figure it out. Yes, the movie about Dick Cheney. Yes, that is where you find that out. Section 1. Purpose. As Americans, we believe that all persons are created equal and endowed with the inalienable rights to life and liberty. A fundamental purpose of government is to secure these inalienable rights. Federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement officers place their lives at risk every day to ensure that these rights are preserved, and also to give me speeding tickets. Sorry, that was me. Law enforcement officers provide the essential protection that all Americans require to raise their families and lead productive lives. I don't know. The relationship between our fellow citizens and law enforcement officers is an important element in their ability to provide that protection. By working directly with their communities, law enforcement officers can help foster a safe environment where we all can prosper. Yeah, we're already getting to that language. That sweet, vague language. Because, I mean, if you look at, like, certain statistics talking about how ineffective cops are at clearing cases, getting convictions, it's a dirty job. But, you know, I guess it depends on what kind of environment Trump wants us all to prosper in. But the executive order continues. Unfortunately, there have been instances in which some officers have misused their authority, challenging the trust of the American people with tragic consequences for individual victims, their communities, and our nation. All Americans are entitled to live with the confidence that the law enforcement officers and agencies in their communities will live up to our nation's founding ideals and will protect the rights of all persons. Particularly in African American communities, we must redouble our efforts as a nation to swiftly address instances of misconduct. And see, it's that vague language there again that really bothers me, particularly in African American communities. We must redouble our efforts as a nation to swiftly address instances of misconduct. See, even though we know that up here, he said some officers have misused their authority, he didn't say police conduct. He didn't say police misconduct. He just said misconduct. So it kind of leaves interpretation. If you're the type to find meanings in the president's speech to say like you like a QAnon persuasion, yeah, that's if you think that the president has been sending you messages, you probably still think he is at this point. Swiftly address instances of misconduct. It's a professional term, but it still sounds like we will punish the irresponsibles. It's coded soft, sugary language, but it's perfect to fit the narrative that may seem fit. The Constitution declares in its preamble that one of its primary purposes was to establish justice. Generations of Americans have marched, fought, bled, and died to safeguard the promise of our founding document and protect our shared inalienable rights. Federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial leaders must act in furtherance of that legacy. All right, so Section 1 was a hodgepodge of patriotic propaganda to get you excited for the state, just nut all over the idea of a nation. That's so great, so fucking awesome. Section 2, certification and credentialing. Here I am again, the dumb one reading. It continues, Section 2A. State and local law enforcement agencies must constantly assess and improve their practices and policies to ensure transparent, safe, and accountable delivery of law enforcement services to their communities. Still very, very vague language, because it still doesn't necessarily say hold accountable. Oh, okay. Maybe I read it one more time. State and local law enforcement agencies must constantly assess and improve their practices and policies to ensure transparent, safe, and accountable delivery of law enforcement services to their communities. See, it says delivery of law enforcement services. It's, again, the vague language is almost hiding like he's trying to be holding cops accountable and building like this kind of reform, but it's not. It's the language is still so vague that the reform is the exact opposite, and I can sense it. Independent credentialing bodies can accelerate these assessments, enhance citizen confidence in law enforcement practices, and allow for the identification and correction of internal deficiencies before those deficiencies result in injury to the public or to law enforcement officers. It's that wonderful language again. Section 2B. The Attorney General shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, allocate Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only to those state and local law enforcement agencies that have sought or are in the process of seeking appropriate credentials from a reputable independent credentialing body certified by the Attorney General. New. William Barr is, I don't know, Jeff Sessions was pretty bad because he was the one who got the Fergusons to walk, I'm pretty sure. He was the administration that had later picked up the aftermath of Ferguson. So I'm not too excited about Attorney General William Barr also allocating Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only to those state and local law enforcement agencies that have sought or are in the process of seeking appropriate credentials from a reputable independent credential. That is fascinating because he's not laying out necessarily what the credentials are to receive this funding publicly. So it's pretty fascinating here that Attorney General is going to fund police federally since the state is going to have to defund in some areas. That's very interesting development, but I don't like the way William Barr looks at America. He looks at it like it's a cheese pizza, and he's hungry. He's very hungry. New York style. Section 2C. The Attorney General shall certify independent credentialing bodies that meet standards to be set by the Attorney General. He's basically handing this over to the Attorney General. He is shifting power of police under the Attorney General with an executive order, which is fascinating because I don't really know how police, but I'm fairly certain that they're state-run. So it's fascinating that he's opening channels for police to work directly for the feds. Yeah, that's hot. It's really hot for such a hot summer. Cool. But you know, here's some more of that sugary coated buttery biscuit language. Should address certain topics in the reviews, such as policies and training regarding use of force and de-escalation techniques, performance management tools, such as early warning systems that help to identify officers who may require intervention, and best practices regarding community engagement. Vague. The Attorney General's standards for certification shall require independent credentialing bodies to, at a minimum, confirm that 1. The state or local law enforcement agencies' use of force policies adhere to all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Okay. I wonder if they'll uphold this point 1. But I wonder if it matters if it meets the local and state, or if it only matters if it just meets the federal at this point. Because like I said, I had originally thought that most police are state locally run. So it's section 2 of point 2 here. The state or local law enforcement agencies' use of force policies prohibit the use of chokeholds, a physical maneuver that restricts an individual's ability to breathe for the purposes of incapacitation, except in those situations where the use of deadly force is allowed by law. Hey, again, I wonder if this is another law to bypass state and local law, which is fascinating because I remember a bunch of people coming out and saying states' rights a lot. Where are they? Section 2, Article D, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. The Attorney General shall engage with existing and prospective independent credentialing bodies to encourage them to offer a cost-effective, targeted credentialing process regarding appropriate use of force policies that law enforcement agencies of all sizes in urban and rural jurisdictions may access. All right, now that we're hitting independent credentialing bodies, are they companies? Are they going to be new bodies that the Attorney General is just going to sprout out of the ground with water and seeds? I don't know, but he sure is just getting a lot of power in the midst of all this chaos. And that's what's really weird, is that most people, all these headlines are just talking about how it doesn't go far enough. But how far is it going to giving the AG power? Because to me, that's the most damning part of this. Associated Press is pissed that it doesn't mention racism, but like I'm pissed it doesn't mention racism and the power move here. This is a power grab, bro. And I watched that video, the interview with Attorney General here on somewhere on this fucking channel, and no, don't give that man power. Oh, it's too late. Section 3, informing information sharing. Section 3, Article A. The Attorney General shall create a database to... He's getting so much power. Create a database to coordinate the sharing of information between and among federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial law enforcement agencies concerning instances of excessive use of force related to law enforcement matters, accounting for applicable privacy and due process rights. All right. So he's going to get a database. Sharing information between federal... And it's only sharing them with the enforcement agencies. Kind of sucks it's not sharing it with the public so they can be informed on who is policing their streets and what kind of record they have. So again, another interesting move. Not quite the one I would have made. Section 3, Article B, I believe. Oh, nice. The database described in subsection A of this section shall include a mechanism to track a permissible terminations or decertifications of law enforcement officers, criminal convictions of law enforcement officers for on-duty conduct, and civil judgments against law enforcement officers for improper use of force. The database described in subsection A of this section shall account for instances where a law enforcement officer resigns or retires while under active investigation related to the use of force. The Attorney General shall take appropriate steps to ensure the information in the database consists only of instances in which law enforcement officers were afforded fair process. Interesting. I don't know what an unfair process would be, and again, who would judge that. Gross language. I think it's fascinating, too, that they want to track cops based on their terminations, decertifications, criminal evictions, on-duty conduct, civil judgments against law enforcement officers for improper use of force. It just makes me wonder, I don't know if it's for accountability uses or rather just the Attorney General getting a roster of free list agents that he could point towards, I don't know, the Army or the Marines or some sort of branch of the military or some other secret organ, I don't know, like a fucking Blackwater. Who the fuck knows what the intention is to have all this database just under the Attorney General, and apparently the independent credentialing bodies that are going to be included in this, which again could be that dude from Blackwater. What the fucking Eric some shit. That sucks. Section 3, Article C, the Attorney General shall regularly and periodically make available to the public aggregated and anonymized data from the database described in subsection A of this section as consistent with applicable law. So, all right. Besides the cynical things that I had said, here's the section where they actually kind of think about the public here. They are going to have data that is going to show, I don't know, more of police convictions or more of police offenses that it seems that that's what they're collecting here. The resigns, the retires, improper use of force, civil judgments, criminal convictions, decertifications, terminations. It's a new database, which I guess we haven't been collecting until this time. But now that the Attorney General is collecting all of this for his said database and his independent credentialing bodies, we will get anonymized, which means anonymous data. It's public aggregated too, so it's already just public information. But he says regularly and periodically. Does not say when, where, why, how. Just gonna do it regularly and periodically. All right. Section 3. Article D, the Attorney General shall, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law, allocate Department of Justice discretionary grant funding only to those law enforcement agencies that submit the information described in subsection B of this section. And that just is so you know, that is only for the state and local law enforcements that fit the checklist that the Attorney General sees fit for their funding. So I don't know what their checklist is. Ooh, and here we go. Don't worry, my babies. We're halfway through. Where the fuck did it go? All right. Section 4. Mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Because that was what's on everybody's mind right now in the defund the police and Black Lives Matter is mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Throw that into the crime bill. The crime executive order. It's not a bill. I don't know why I called it that. He said that there was going to be some legislation coming down the pipeline from Republicans in the Senate and from the gutters of the Democrats. So we'll see how that goes. See if it builds upon this nefarious infrastructure. Section 4, Article A. Since the mid-20th century, America has witnessed a reduction in targeted mental health treatment. Targeted mental health treatment. See, it's very coded and sugary because it says health treatment. It sounds like you would get something from a doctor, right? It sounds like you would get treatment. In a cynical way, it means targeted mental health solutions? Am I maybe pushing the line there? I don't know. If you haven't read Madness and Civilizations by Bald Gay Man, Michel Foucault, I definitely think you should. A great history read about civilizations and their undesirables. All right. Ineffective policies have left more individuals with mental health needs on our nation's streets, which has expanded the responsibilities of law enforcement officers. As a society, we must take steps to safely and humanely care for those who suffer from mental illness and substance abuse in a manner that addresses such individuals' needs and the needs of their communities. It is the policy of the United States to promote the use of appropriate social services as the primary source to individuals who suffer from impaired mental health. homelessness and addiction, recognizing that because law enforcement officers often encounter such individuals suffering from these conditions in the course of their duties, all officers should be properly trained for such encounters. Now, I probably can't show that video on Twitch. It's horrifying. It's horrifying. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm just gonna get rid of the video, even on Twitch. I'm gonna have to turn down the theme song. I'm gonna go here, and I'm gonna play it anyways. Now this is the police responding to a call about a man at a bus stop waving a gun at traffic. Now to me, it seems like the police did not know how to handle this situation whatsoever. But by the sounds of it, I wonder if you can guess what happened.
It's gonna suck, but let's put ourselves out on the sidewalk so we get the traffic out of our back.
You want to advise them that we're going to be stepping up? For sure.
And if I think we're going to be stepping up with 700 here, and we have 475.
Just try it as quick as you can.
Fire, still 10-3.
Subject! Both hands up in the air, show them clear. Put
The
your
man is
hands in
just
the
laying
air, do
down
it
on his
now.
back.
You need to keep those hands in the air. Keep your hands where we can see them. Lay on your stomach. Keep your hands away from your waistband. Lay on your stomach, or force will be used against you.
Right under his belly button. Yeah.
Lay on your stomach.
He has it in his
Keep
waist.
your hands up. If you put your hands towards your waistband, force will be used against you. Lay on your stomach.
Fuck you. Go fuck yourself.
Lay down.
Do what I'm...
Ten four, shots fired.
Now the cops were called because there was a emergency for someone waving a gun at traffic. So understandably, they showed up to the scene a little hot. But there was no de-escalation there. Only demands, only screaming, only yelling. The man was on his back when they approached, so it's kind of hard to argue how they approached was the right way. But I don't know, I'm not there on the trainings, but that man was shot dead for having a BB gun. So, the Attorney General shall, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, as appropriate, identify and develop opportunities to train law enforcement officers with respect to encounters with individuals suffering from impaired mental health, homelessness, and addiction. In consultation, develop opportunities to train law enforcement officers. So that doesn't actually sound like they're sending any co-responders. It sounds like they're doing more training with law enforcement on to handle individuals suffering with impaired mental health, suffering from homelessness, and suffering from addiction. It's training law enforcement officers to encounter these more. Maybe it could get better, but I doubt it. To increase the capacity of social workers working directly with law enforcement agencies and to provide guidance regarding the development and implementation of co-responder programs, which involve social workers or other mental health professionals working alongside law enforcement officers so that they arrive and address situations together. The Attorney General and the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall prioritize resources as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to support such opportunities. I could still see that going out of hand because still one person just has a gun. But all right, Section 4, Article D. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall survey community support models addressing mental health, homelessness, and addiction. Within 90 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Human Health and Human Services shall summarize the results of this survey in a report to the President, through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, which shall include specific recommendations regarding how appropriated funds can be reallocated to support widespread adoption of successful models and recommendations for additional funding if needed. That sounds like more vague language of we don't know where that money is going to go. He hasn't even said that reallocated funds, where that's coming from, where that's going. It just says that he is putting the Health and Human Services Department to work, apparently, because they haven't been doing anything. They should have been collecting this data regardless. Shall survey community support models addressing mental health. Okay, well, I don't feel like they should have had an executive order to be told to do this specifically. Like Section 4, Article C, sounds like they should have been doing this a long time ago to properly or appropriately give funds to the Health and Human Services so that they can attend to health and human services. Section 4, Article D, the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall, in coordination with the Attorney General and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, prioritize resources as appropriate and consistent with applicable law to implement community support models as recommended in the report described in subsection C of this section. It also sounds like it's a heavy merger between the law enforcement and health and human services in this particular sphere. They're apparently going to start policing homelessness, mental illness, and addiction a lot harder. So it's funny that the war on drugs is kind of taking a new turn. It's more on addiction than it is the drug itself. Because they know they can't stop the drug. They can't stop addiction either. How can you stop addiction if you can't stop the drug? But it does help fund a state through the private prison system and helps fund private prisons. So, not the positives I would want to seek out from justice and criminal justice and not even criminal justice, but policing and health and human services reform. This is not quite the utopia I imagined it to be, where mental illness, homelessness, and addiction is a crime. That's dark. Not into it. But again, if you've read Madness and Civilization by Foucault, it's not too much new. Societies have been treating their undesirables like trash for a very long time, rather than trying to be more compassionate and caring to people's situations, especially in a time like this when commodities literally just come out of our ass and only seem to really take a hard hit when a virus comes out or it's time for a recession. But again, I'm not anywhere near any of these departments, nor do I want to be. Honestly. I'm just saying. Section 5 legislation and grant programs. This is where we get that sweet money. Money, 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 money. Money. Section 5, Article A. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy and the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, shall develop and purpose new legislation to the Congress that could be enacted to enhance the tools and resources available to improve law enforcement practices and build community engagement. All right. So we're getting the President of Domestic Policy and the Director of Office Management and Budget to come together with Congress to write new legislation with the Attorney General to enhance tools and resources available to improve law enforcement practices and build community engagement. Perfect vague languages to build the perfect vague utopia you want to build. I know what narrative they're building. I mean, they want a police state. I don't know why William Barr wouldn't want more power as the Attorney General, since he's served it. Like, I think this is his second administration, first under George W. Bush and now Trump. So, why not give him more power with a guy who's willing to give him so much more? Section 5, Article B. All right. The legislation described in subsection A of this section shall include recommendations to enhance current grant programs to improve law enforcement practices and build community engagement, including through point 1, assisting state and local law enforcement agencies with implementing the credentialing process described in section 2 of this order, the reporting described in section 3 of this order, and the co-responder and community support models described in section 4 of this order. All right. So, yep. All right, well, that's just consistent with everything. But he's also just directing legislation. These are the points that he's saying, that this is what he wants the upcoming legislation to be about. And here it is that he wants it to focus on getting the Attorney General in touch with independent credentialed bodies for regulation of our police, rather than people, public organizations, maybe, or a specific department, or maybe even opening a new department, like how we started Space Force or some shit. Call it Stop the Police Force. Start the Police Love. I know it's a long name, but maybe we can make it an acronym and call it Stop the STPF STPL Department. Just a suggestion. Adopt and implement improved use of force policies and procedures, including scenario-driven de-escalation techniques. Improved use of force policies and procedures. That doesn't say that they're going to actually bolster good techniques that are going to make the police less violent. So we shall see if any of this encourages cops to stop beating the shit out of people, but there's nothing in here about actual police accountability and how they're going to move forward on all the brutality that it literally has been happening under the guise of curfews, which, I mean, he's been calling everybody that's been in these protests thugs, not the peaceful ones. I think he tends to acknowledge that they exist, but he's mostly focused on the police riots and calling the people getting brutalized by the police thugs. So why would he try to push any legislation forward that would hold cops accountable for the way that they've treated their people? But at the same time, a lot of cops have gotten fired because of the way that they've treated their people, but it's because they've reached extreme cases. So it's fascinating that we're not reaching a point in level where the mayors, the governors, and the police departments have to face accountability for the actions that they took during these curfews. They all made those decisions, but nobody's taking accountability of it, and everybody's pretending like everybody's fucking on the same team. It's gross. Whew. That was a long one. Point 3, retention of high-performing law enforcement officers and recruitment of law enforcement officers who are likely to be high-performing. What does high-performing mean? I see that I haven't fixed the screen yet, so that's wonderful. I'm still doing this professionally. Hey. But here it is, point 3, retention of high-performing law enforcement officers and recruitment of law enforcement officers who are likely to be high-performing. So, I mean, that's probably, they're going to look at psychological performance, they're going to look at physical performance, they're going to look at all kinds of performances to think whether or not you are applicable or the best suit for the job. And so far, I think William Barr likes the way that the police have been enforcing the law as of late, and he's going to want to retain the kind of high performers that would continue this kind of high performance that we've already seen. So look forward to that. Point 4, confidential access to mental health services for law enforcement officers. Hey, confidential access to mental health services for law enforcement officers. That means fuck your HIPAA. The cops are going to know everything about your mental issues, but that's okay. That's so that they can give it to the co-responders. So there's no reason to worry about the cops getting your mental health service. Okay. Let's see. Point 5 of this dog shit. Programs aimed at developing or improving relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve, including through community outreach and listening sessions, and supporting nonprofit organizations that focus on improving stressed relationships between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. That's fucking nuts. That is the barely, like, literal tiniest pinch that he, like, said in this entire order about community outreach. I don't even know what the fuck listening sessions means. Is that like the things where the mayors have been talking to their citizens in town halls over the Zooms and calls? I don't know what the fuck that means. What's a listening session? And supporting nonprofit organizations that focus on improving stress relationships between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. Ooh. Supporting nonprofit organizations that improve. That sounds like nonprofit organizations that support the police. That was basically directing. It's finding a way to direct public funds or tax money to go towards non-profit organizations that focus on improving stress relationships between law enforcement officers and the communities they serve. I really wonder, because I don't know if Bulletproof, also known as Bulletproof Warrior, taught by Rob Grossman, I don't know if that's considered a nonprofit and if it fits under the guise. And if it does, that's really gross. Because everybody, y'all heard of that. Y'all have heard of Grossman. So if somehow they found like another fuck you to the public and they snuck this in there just to give the man money, ew. I guess I'm going to have to Google it. God damn it. Oh, it's coffee too. Does he not have like a website anymore? That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I don't see a website for it, so I don't know what kind of an organization that is anymore. So there's that. All right. Well, section 6 and the final last bit, the walk of shame to the end of this. General provisions. There's some extra shit to throw on the end in case you made it this far. Section 6, Article A. Nothing in this order shall be construed or impair. Construed to impair or otherwise affect. Point 1. The authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, and legislative proposals. There it is. So the Office of Management and Budget is going to be handling those nonprofit organization program funding and also how we manage the allocations of funds that the legislation is going to bring up for Attorney General to hand to the President to sign. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. I like that. He throws this language right here, I'm pretty sure is in almost every executive order. B. Right here, this order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. So that it can be used in justifications of precedent. So that's cool. He it's law now. It's law. But it's an order to make legislation and move public funding and also support the police. Section 6, General Provisions, Article C. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other persons. Yeah, those last two are usually just disclaimers. The last whole section was like a disclaimer. I hope I broke that down enough because I found out about all I could from it. Yeah, that was the most pro-cop thing you could sign in a time that people are really suffering. So, shouts out to the world's greatest orange president. I hope Melania's happy. That's really the best thing I could say about this. I don't have any other nice things to say. And Mama said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Oh, look at that. I hope you enjoy that sneak peek. You see that? Yeah, I used the Nord. Thank you for joining me. I only wanted to be on an hour because I'm trying not to die on this chair. So if you like this shit, I guess people do that, like and subscribe. And they share, they review. Sometimes y'all just ignore it and maybe stop by a later time and check it out again because it was like, all right, not bad. But there's no reason to explain myself any further. I feel like there's enough past data for you to collect and figure out what this is for yourself. And if you don't like it, please stay radical and have a beautiful day.